We remember the myths and legends about female gladiators and fabulous Amazons. It was always considered that these are fairy tales of the ancient past, but in the 21st century, myths and legends survive and become reality. In this issue, we begin the story about the great female gladiators and beautiful Amazons of the 21st century. These girls have become legends of the sports pantheon. Their coliseum is a ring, stadium, octagon, and other sports arenas of our time. On these sites, our heroines compete, demonstrating strength, courage, and the will to win. Centuries have passed, but people are still driven by the thirst for fame and wealth, to be the first on the Olympic podium, victory in the arena, to glorify themselves for centuries. Today we will talk about one of these legends. There is an athlete in women's martial arts that every fan remembers. It's Ronda Rousey. She recently retired, but until now the UFC women's division has not seen a star of her caliber. Let's go back to the Ronda Rousey era and remember how good she was. She lost her first fight at the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens to Claudia Hill, an Austrian judoka and future Olympic silver medalist. But that same year she won the World Junior Championships. Then there was a new Olympic cycle, victories at the Pan American Championships, silver at the World Championships in Rio de Janeiro. It was time for the Beijing Olympics, where in one of the fights, 21-year-old Ronda lost to Dutch judoka Edith Bosch, who was the world champion at the time. As a result, the tournament grid brought her to the tatami with an athlete from Germany, Annette Bohm, whom Rousey defeated with a difference of 9 points and won the bronze medal of the Olympic Games in women's judo. After winning a bronze medal at the Olympics, 21-year-old Rousey realized that her path to judo was over. After Beijing, she was completely at a loss. The money from the Olympic Committee was enough to rent an apartment at most. The girl had no professional skills. She temporarily worked as a waitress and a bartender. She was brought to MMA by meeting Manuel Gamburian and Caro Parisian, with whom she often went to judo training while still a teenager. Ronda followed the fighting career of Armenian judokas, and after the Olympics continued to train with them at the Hayastan Academy. It was 2010. Everyone was watching Gina Carano's fights. Women's fighting had finally come out of the underground and was waiting for its superstar. Having won 3 amateur fights, Rousey decided to try herself in professional fights and debuted at the King of the Cage tournament. She finished her first fight in this tournament with the armbar technique in 25 seconds. After 2 victories, Ronda signed a contract with the second promotion in the world. Strikeforce, her debut against Sarah D'Alelio was a bit crumpled. The referee stopped the fight, deciding that Ronda's opponent was injured, and although she did not agree with the referee's decision, the result remained the same. The next fight was more serious. Ronda met with the future Bellator champion, Julia Budd. The fight took place in Las Vegas. Rousey immediately rushed into a clinch. As soon as the women were on the floor, the outcome came quickly. Ronda's signature move is the armbar. Subsequently, Rousey will win more than one of her fights with this painful hold, and not only in MMA. In Strikeforce, Ronda had the prospect of holding 2 big fights with the featherweight champion Chris Cyborg and the bantamweight champion Miesha Tate. The issue was resolved by itself. Christiane failed a doping test and deserved a disqualification. Tate and Rousey started a long media war in which they did not skimp on statements. Ronda has yet to taste her own blood. She was picked for opponents. She was spoiled. Protected. She has yet to find out if she is a real fighter. Let me tell you how spoiled I was. I broke my big toe when I was 11. My mom made me run all night because she was training me for a competition even though I was injured. I broke my foot when I was 15, and I had 8 matches in one weekend. I walked around school with a broken ear and a smashed face, and it didn't make me popular. If Miesha thinks I'm spoiled, she better look up the dictionary. In the cage, the athletes fought uncompromisingly. As soon as the fight began, Tate rushed forward with punches. Ronda responded with a throw. Miesha defended herself well on the floor. She defended herself from the armbar and ended up on top. She even managed to take Ronda's back. She was not going to give in to her opponent in the fight. When Rousey got up, Tate tried to knock her down again. In the stand, Miesha also felt confident until she forgot about defense. Now the initiative was in Ronda's hands. She bent Miesha's joint in the opposite direction. The legendary arm bar from Ronda Rousey. Ronda not only won the championship belt, but also the title of the main woman in MMA. Strikeforce was living out its last months, and its queen was expecting an incredible rise. In 2011, in an interview with KMZ, UFC President Dana White said, "There are no plans for women's fights in the UFC." But a year later, he was no longer so categorical. Women? Everything is possible, with time. Before the final takeover of Strikeforce, he admitted, "The only reason women will appear in the UFC is Ronda Rousey." Ronda was the perfect person to promote the sport. She was the Tyson of women's MMA, fast, spectacular, mean. She worked hard not only on her skills, but also on her image. Expressive eyes, heavy rock during her entrances, signature smile at weigh-ins, leather jackets, tight dresses with cleavage. With the advent of popularity, a powerful charge of feminism was added to the image. Women in martial arts challenged the generally accepted ideas about what a real woman should be. People do not want to admit that there are no male or female roles. People can do anything. There is no division by gender. I think that fighting is one of the last frontiers, you know. After defeating Sarah Kaufman, and thus defending the Strikeforce championship belt along with it, she moved to the UFC. In the history of the UFC, Ronda Rousey became a pioneer. The first female fight in the history of the organization was her fight against Liz Carmouche, a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps. The challenger immediately had to face the onslaught of the champion. Ronda knocked her to the ground and finished the fight with her legendary armbar. An incredible victory in the very first fight. Result: 7 fights, 7 wins, armbar in the first round, and 2 championship titles of 2 major organizations. Only 2 opponents out of 7 lasted more than a minute. Ronda was at her best. There were many offers to shoot for magazines, offers to star in films and on TV. Ronda became an actress and tried herself in action films, in films where there are a lot of fight scenes, fights, chases, and stunts. Given her sports experience, she was ready for this, and starred in such films as The Expendables 3, a 2014 film, in a team with Sylvester Stallone, Fast and Furious 7, a 2015 film in the company of actors Vin Diesel, Dwayne Johnson, Michelle Rodriguez, and the film Mile 22 with actor and producer Mark Wahlberg. By starring in these films, she created competition in the film industry for her Octagon colleague Gina Carano, who at that time had already starred in several action films, including Fast and Furious 6, which was released in 2013. Rousey also became the coach of the first female Ultimate Fighter. The rival team was coached by Miesha Tate. They met in a rematch at UFC 168. There was also a new media war. The confrontation between the girls flared up with renewed vigor. The fight began. Ronda immediately found a moment for a throw. She became more dangerous in the clinch, as well as in the ground and pound technique. Miesha did not sit idle either, but on the ground, she was still noticeably inferior to the champion. Another thing is the stand. Here, Tate looked no worse, but she wanted to beat Rousey in her element. For the first time in Rousey's career, this fight lasted more than 1 round. The champion effectively threw her opponent, exhausted her at the net, and again looked for a moment for a takedown. It seems that she was ripe for an arm bar. Tate once again saved herself, and again the result was not achieved. In the final of the fight, Ronda came out and performed her signature move, armbar. Tate's second loss came against Ronda Rousey. Rousey has often been criticized for her lack of strong opponents. Indeed, none of her opponents had much sporting experience before coming to MMA. with the exception of Sarah McMahon, a freestyle wrestler and 2004 Olympic silver medalist. She made it clear early on that there would be no takedown, and Ronda decided, well, so be it. Then another opponent, Alexis Davis, tested Ronda's striking power on herself. The fight lasted 16 seconds. It seemed that Ronda would now face her toughest challenge yet in the form of Kat Zingano, an undefeated challenger with a 9-0 record who had defeated Miesha Tate and Amanda Nunes. Videos of her incredible victories went viral on social media. However, her successes excited her. She started talking seriously about fights with men, possibly with Mayweather and possibly with Velasquez. And she was supported in this by both Dana White and Joe Rogan, who emotionally noted that Ronda could beat half of the men's bantamweight division. It is unlikely that these words should be taken seriously, but one thing was clear: Ronda did not see any rivals among women. Rousey's fight with Beth Correia only strengthened her belief in her own invincibility, and most importantly, in her own striking technique. The Brazilian behaved boldly and confidently, but this did not help her in any way. Rousey won this fight, outplaying the challenger in striking technique and demonstrating to the public an excellent striking combination. Finished the fight early and pleased the fans with a tough unconditional knockout. It seemed that this victory came to Rousey without much difficulty. Even more surreal was the fact that local fans supported Ronda Rousey, because the fight against Correia took place in Brazil, the home country of the contender. For the first time in UFC history, local fans supported not a compatriot, but a guest from the USA. Ronda became the best athlete according to ESPN, beating Serena Williams. Her photo appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated. The last time an MMA fighter was so lucky was in 2007. Business Insider called Rousey the strongest athlete alive. Her MMA record reached 12-0. All victories were ahead of schedule, and only one fight lasted longer than one round. It was hard not to believe everything that was said about her, and Ronda believed she needed an opponent worthy of the champion. Holly Holm, a world boxing champion in 3 weight categories, came to MMA at the same time as Rousey, and for 2 years combined performances in the cage and in the ring. Mixed martial arts turned out to be more promising. Ronda opened the way for women in the UFC. Soon, there was talk of a fight between the two champions. Holly Holm could become a contender for the title that belonged to Rousey, but the preacher's daughter's unimpressive victories in the first meetings made her an outsider. The odds were 1-9. Shortly before this fight, Ronda's photo was placed on the cover of the main boxing magazine, The Ring, and she became the first MMA fighter to appear on the cover of the magazine, which was called the Bible of Boxing. Many believed that there were no worthy opponents to enter the cage against the champion. She can beat anyone. She has excellent striking technique. She is an unrivaled master of wrestling. And most importantly, her signature move is the arm bar, with which she won most of her fights. So, in the status of an international superstar, Rousey entered the Octagon in Australia, setting a UFC record for ticket sales. The stadium was filled with 56,242 spectators. Ronda took the center of the cage and went forward. Holm worked on counterattacks. She moved well, and the champion simply could not catch up with her. The challenger studied her opponent well and was ready for this fight. Holm did not play by the champion's rules. She was taller than Rousey and decided to use her advantage. First, she wore out the champion. Rousey had to run after her quite a bit. Then, Rousey tried to outplay Holm in striking technique. Rousey's self-confidence failed. She began to run into counter-strikes from Holm. There was a complete feeling that the coaching staff in Rousey's corner could not advise her anything. Ronda urgently needed to change tactics. Finally, Ronda entered the clinch, But Holly was ready. The challenger felt the distance perfectly, confidently defended herself on the ground, but Rousey herself continued to run into almost all counter-strikes from home. This punch put an end to her MMA career. A powerful high kick to the head was a complete surprise for Ronda Rousey, a real surprise for the champion. That's where the legend ended. It seemed that Holm had done the impossible. This punch dropped Rousey's career so much that she couldn't get up. That was the end of her MMA career. After her defeat, there was a real storm of emotions in the media. On the one hand, a lot of hatred from ill-wishers, and on the other, words of sympathy from Rousey's fans. No one could believe the defeat of the MMA star. She disappeared from the media for a while. According to rumors, she was experiencing severe depression. The psychological damage was stronger than the physical. After this, it is important for the fighter to recover, both physically and psychologically, reduce stress levels, regain confidence in himself and his abilities. It is worth remembering that at that time, Ronda Rousey was not only a UFC star, but also the most financially successful project of this organization. So a year later, she returned to the octagon to take her title from the new champion. The UFC management decided to give their favorite a second chance. At that time, the UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion title belonged to the champion from Brazil, Amanda Nunes, who, by an interesting coincidence, took everything right. But the UFC title didn't stay in one hand for long. Too many contenders wanted to get it. The comeback was supposed to be triumphant. However, Rousey had already lost her former form by that time, and the fight didn't go according to plan. Amanda Nunes didn't want to give up her title to the former champion. You can watch a detailed review of this fight on our channel in the short videos section. Swimming or judo? The answer is obvious. As a child, Ronda chose judo. Ronda's mother, Anne Maria DeMars, is the first American world champion in judo. On the tatami, young Ronda is constantly in motion. Concentrating on every aspect of technique, she immediately fell in love with this sport, attending her first competition a month after starting training. The girl was scared by the large hall. She stood at the edge of the tatami and confusedly fiddled with her belt. Then her mother said just one phrase, "You can win." From that moment on, weakness was not an option for Ronda. She won the tournament, finishing all the fights with a victory. At 17 years old, she became the youngest girl in the United States to qualify for the Olympic Games. Losing in the UFC didn't mean the end of Ronda Rousey's career. She found herself in wrestling. World Wrestling Entertainment launched her career in 2018 and debuted at WrestleMania 34, winning the WWE Raw Women's Championship at SummerSlam. To sum it up, Ronda Rousey has succeeded in everything she's tried. The first American woman to win an Olympic medal in judo, winning bronze at the 2008 Summer Olympics. The only woman to win a championship title in both the UFC and WWE, as well as the only woman to close a pay-per-view show in both companies. In 2015, she was voted the best female athlete of all time by ESPN fans, released an autobiography, My Fight, Your Fight, and Fox Sports called her one of the defining athletes of the 21st century. Ronda Rousey has become famous for centuries, having written her name in the textbooks of world records and outstanding sporting achievements along with other athletes, holders of Olympic medals and champion belts. She has become a legend. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new releases. Until next time.